The human soldier whispered in the queen's ear, and the queen said, "Stop the war." Jagged mountains stretched like broken teeth, rivers of molten metal cut through dark valleys, and clouds of gray smoke rose endlessly into the sky. This was Vera 9, a planet torn apart by decades of war between the alien monarchs and the coalition of interstellar forces, of which humans were a small but respected part. Elias' hands tightened around the armrests. He had fought on many planets before, but something about Vera 9 felt different. The conflict here wasn't just about territory or resources, it was personal. Every crater, every collapsed building, every motionless machine told a story of desperation. "Approaching drop zone," the pilot said, her voice calm but tight. "8th Squad, prepare for landing." Elias looked over at his team, 8 soldiers, all human, all skilled, all ready. Each one carried their standard gear, armor reinforced for alien environments, plasma rifles, energy grenades, and the small, shining devices humans used to communicate silently across distances. "Keep your eyes open," Elias said. His voice was low but firm. "Varans are disciplined. They won't give us an inch without a fight. Stay sharp. Watch for anything unusual." The transport shook as it pierced the planet's upper atmosphere. Below, he could see the alien army lined up on a ridge. Their armor was bright, reflective, almost ceremonial, but there was something off. Even as they faced the humans, there was a hesitation in their formation, a pause that no other soldier could notice. Only Elias' eyes caught it. The ship landed with a jolt. Dust and smoke filled the air, making it hard to see more than a few meters ahead. The humans climbed out, their boots sinking into ash-like soil. Around them, the sounds of war were constant. Distant explosions, the hiss of energy weapons, and the low hum of flying war machines. Elias took a deep breath. "Eyes sharp, move!" They advanced toward the alien front. At first, the Varans did not attack immediately. They simply watched, their bright helmets reflecting the gray sky. Then, with perfect coordination, they fired. The humans ducked behind craters and jagged rocks. Plasma bolts sizzled past them, scorching the ground. "Return fire!" Elias shouted. His squad fired in bursts, careful not to waste energy cells. Despite being outnumbered, the humans fought with a precision and coordination that no other species could match. Amidst the chaos, Elias noticed something unexpected. One of the Varans, a soldier at the far end of the ridge, seemed frozen. His weapon hung loosely, and his head tilted slightly as if he were listening to a voice only he could hear. "Interesting," Elias murmured under his breath. "They're not all in sync." He signaled his squad to advance cautiously. They moved like shadows, using the terrain to their advantage. Humans had always been good at thinking in unpredictable ways, and Elias intended to use that skill. Suddenly, a loud, commanding voice echoed across the battlefield. Elias turned his head. Above the ridge, hovering in a magnificent golden craft, was the figure of the queen herself, Queen Thalera. Her presence was commanding, yet her eyes were clouded with worry. She raised her hand, and the soldiers stopped firing. For a moment, the entire battlefield was silent except for the wind. "Captain Cade," his second-in-command, Lieutenant Mara Lynn, whispered, "That's her, the queen, she's watching us." Elias didn't respond immediately. He kept his eyes on the queen. He had studied her people, the Varans, and knew that she was not a cruel leader. Her hesitation suggested she did not wish for this endless war, yet duty and tradition forced her to fight. That conflict within her gave Elias an idea, a way humans could reach her in a way that no one else could. The humans pressed forward carefully. Each movement was calculated. They avoided the main paths, relying instead on the scattered debris and ruins for cover. Elias' mind raced. He had been trained to think tactically, but here, strategy alone wouldn't be enough. Understanding the psychology of the enemy, that was the key. By midday, they reached the edge of a small valley. From there, they could see a narrow path leading up to the Queen's hovering craft. It was heavily guarded, but Elias noticed something remarkable. The Varan soldiers stationed there seemed uneasy. Their formation was precise, yet every now and then one of them would glance at the Queen and then falter. "Humans are different," Elias muttered. "They fight, yes, but they also think." The squad set up a temporary camp behind the ruins. Elias sent a secure message to their command. "Observation, Queen appears conflicted. Standard assault may not be necessary. Recommend recon and psychological approach." Mara frowned. "You're thinking diplomacy here?" Elias smiled faintly. "Sometimes the sharpest weapon isn't the gun." Night fell, and with it came a strange quiet. The explosions from earlier were far off now, replaced by a soft hum that seemed to come from the Queen's craft. The humans huddled around small heat generators, eating rations and checking equipment. Elias remained awake, staring at the sky. He thought about the humans' history. On countless worlds, humans had survived against impossible odds because they adapted, because they saw possibilities others didn't. Maybe here on Vera 9 they could do the same. Suddenly, a small flare of light caught his attention. One of the Veran patrols was moving strangely. They weren't patrolling, they were circling, pausing, almost listening to something. Elias studied them carefully. He realized the soldiers were not mindless warriors. They were being directed by someone higher up, someone who feared the consequences of the war as much as the humans did. "That's it," Elias whispered to himself. "That hesitation, it's fear, not weakness." "And fear can be reasoned with." Mara, noticing his concentration, asked, "What are you thinking, Elias?" "Tomorrow," he said quietly, "we go closer. We find a way to show the Queen that humans can help her stop this without dishonor. We can make her see another path." The humans settled into their makeshift camp, but Elias stayed on watch, eyes never leaving the faint glow of the Queen's craft above. Sleep came reluctantly, but even in dreams he planned. The next morning, the battlefield looked even harsher in the pale light. Smoke swirled through valleys and the bodies of machines littered the ground. Yet Elias noticed something subtle. The Veran soldiers' movements were slightly slower, less coordinated, hesitation, and that hesitation was hope. "Today we find our opening," he said to his team. "Stay alert, move as one, and remember the Queen may be our target, but we're not here to harm her. We're here to show her there's another way." The squad nodded. Humans had a reputation for courage, yes, but more than that, they had a reputation for ingenuity. Every battle they fought was not just with strength, but with brains and empathy. That combination had saved worlds before, and it might save Vera 9 now. As they advanced, Elias caught one last glimpse of Queen Thalera. Her eyes met his through the golden reflection of her craft. In that moment, he could almost read her thoughts, worry, doubt, longing for peace. He nodded once silently as if to say, "We understand. We can help." And with that, Captain Elias Cade led his humans into the first step of a war that might finally end. Not with more bloodshed, but with understanding, courage, and a whisper that could change everything. The morning sun burned pale gold through the smoke of Vera 9 ruined sky. Captain Elias Cade led his squad cautiously through a valley of shattered stone and twisted metal. The human soldiers moved like shadows, silent except for the soft crunch of ash beneath their boots. "Keep your eyes sharp," Elias whispered. "The closer we get, the more dangerous it becomes, but the key isn't fighting, it's observation." Lieutenant Mara Lin nodded. "You mean we're looking for an opening?" "Yes," Elias said, scanning the horizon. "Not an opening to attack, but an opening to understand them. The Queen isn't cruel, that much I can see, but her people, they're trapped by duty and fear. If we can show her another way, maybe we can end this war without more bloodshed." The squad moved deeper into the valley. Around them, the remains of alien machines lay scattered, some still sparking with dying energy. A few Veran patrols passed overhead in hovering craft, scanning the terrain with glowing sensors. Elias' heart beat faster. They had to move carefully. One wrong step and the mission could fail before it even began. Elias crouched behind a jagged rock and gestured to his squad. "Hold, watch the patrol, look at how they react. Every hesitation tells a story." The soldiers observed. Indeed, the Varans didn't move with the perfect rhythm of trained automatons. Every so often, one would pause, glance toward the Queen's craft, and then resume patrol. "They're afraid," Mara whispered, "but not afraid of us, afraid of something else." Elias nodded. "Exactly. They follow orders without question, but the orders aren't coming from what they want. They're coming from the pressure of duty, tradition, and fear of disappointing their queen. That's our opening." Hours passed as they watched. During that time, Elias noticed patterns in the Varans' movements. Some guards always paused near the craft, some hovered at a distance, and some seemed to communicate silently with subtle gestures. Elias recognized the signs of a strict command hierarchy, but also of uncertainty at the top. "Captain," one soldier murmured, "look at that." Elias followed the gesture and saw a smaller craft detach from the Queen's main ship. It moved slowly, almost cautiously, carrying a figure who Elias recognized immediately from reconnaissance scans. An advisor, a high-ranking Varen who seemed responsible for relaying the Queen's commands. "They're not acting aggressively," Elias said. "They're nervous." "And that nervousness tells us something. The Queen doesn't want this war either. The question is, how do we reach her without provoking them?" Mara frowned. "And you think we can convince her with what? Words?" Elias smiled faintly. "Humans have always used words to survive, Mara. Words, ideas, empathy. Sometimes those are more powerful than any weapon." As they continued forward, the humans came across a ridge that overlooked the Queen's hovering craft. From here, they could see the sprawling battlefield in full. The sight was terrifying. Dozens of alien soldiers stood ready, their energy weapons glowing in the pale light. And yet, Elias noticed something extraordinary. The soldiers did not seem fully committed. Many hesitated, glanced at each other, or shifted their weight nervously. "See that?" Elias said, pointing. "They're waiting for direction, not orders. That's our window. The Queen is the key. If she can be shown another way, the soldiers will follow." The squad set up a temporary observation point, using rocks and debris for cover. Elias pulled out a small hollow projector, a device that allowed him to communicate with the human's base ship in orbit. He began recording the patterns of movement, the pauses, the subtle gestures, everything. "This is more than intelligence," Elias said to Mara. "This is a blueprint for diplomacy. If we can understand the chain of command and the fears driving it, we can reach the Queen with a message she can't ignore." Night fell again, and the valley grew cold. The humans huddled near small heat sources, conserving energy while remaining alert. Elias remained awake, thinking about the next step. "We can't just storm the Queen's craft," he murmured to himself. "We need to get her attention in a way that won't look like a threat, something subtle, something she'll respect." Mara approached him quietly. "Captain, how do you plan to do that? She's protected by dozens of guards, and if they sense us, we won't get a second chance." Elias looked at her, eyes steady. "We don't need to sneak past them. We need to show them we're not the enemy. Humans have a reputation for courage and honesty. Sometimes that's enough to get through to someone who wants peace, but is trapped by tradition." He pulled out a small human artifact, a mirror-like device that could project a holographic image. He had an idea, to send a simple message to the Queen, one that would bypass her advisors and reach her directly. "The message has to be clear, simple, and impossible to ignore," Elias said. "It's not just a plea, it's proof that humans can offer a solution without dishonor. Without violence. That's what she's waiting for, even if she doesn't know it yet." The humans spent the rest of the night preparing. They programmed the device, rehearsed the message, and made sure every soldier knew their role. If they failed, the Queen might never trust them, and the war would continue. At dawn, Elias led the squad to the ridge overlooking the Queen's craft again. The air was tense, and every shadow seemed to move with purpose. The humans stayed hidden, watching. Then something unexpected happened. One of the Queen's advisors appeared on a small balcony of the main craft. He scanned the battlefield, frowning, and then he paused. His attention seemed fixed on something in the valley below. Elias' heart raced. The advisor had seen them, but he had not sounded an alarm. "Perfect," Elias whispered. "He's curious, not aggressive. That means the Queen might be receptive." The squad activated the hollow projector. A small, flickering light rose into the sky, forming a simple human figure waving slowly. It wasn't threatening, but it was impossible to ignore. The Queen's advisor leaned closer, studying it. The human figure raised one hand in greeting, then pointed toward the battlefield, showing the paused soldiers and their hesitation. The Queen herself appeared on the balcony a moment later. Elias could see her eyes, sharp and intelligent, yet filled with doubt. The holographic figure mimicked human gestures of peace, open hands, nods, a calm posture. Elias held his breath. This was the moment of truth. The advisor spoke softly to the Queen, gesturing toward the valley. She leaned forward, her expression unreadable. Elias knew she understood that humans had observed her soldiers, understood their hesitation, and were offering a solution, a way to end the fighting without dishonor. Hours passed as the Queen considered the message. Elias stayed hidden, careful not to provoke the guards. His mind raced. The message had to be received and understood, but the Queen's response was unpredictable. If she rejected it, the humans might have to fight their way back to safety. Finally, the Queen raised a hand, and the craft descended slightly, closer to the valley. She spoke, her voice clear and commanding, though Elias could not hear the words. The advisor looked at the humans and nodded slightly. Elia's heart leapt. A small gesture, but it meant something. The queen had acknowledged their presence and, more importantly, their intent. Mara turned to Elias. Did we do it? Elias shook his head, but a small smile appeared. Not yet, but we've opened the first door. The queen is listening. That's more than anyone else has achieved in decades. The rest of the day passed without incident. The queen's craft remained near the battlefield, and her soldiers continued their hesitation. It was clear. Something had shifted. The humans were no longer just intruders. They were observers, messengers, proof that another path was possible. That night, as Elias prepared his squad for rest, he reflected on what had happened. Humans had a reputation for bravery, yes, but more than that, they had the ability to see possibilities others could not. On countless worlds, humans had survived impossible situations because they adapted, because they observed, because they understood the hearts of their enemies. Tomorrow would be the real test. The queen could choose to ignore them, or she could begin to act. Elias knew that the next step required even more courage and subtlety. The humans would have to continue proving that they were not just fighters, they were allies of peace. As he looked up at the queen's hovering craft, Elias whispered to himself, "We'll find the way." We always do. And somewhere above, in the golden light of her craft, Queen Thalara began to consider that maybe, just maybe, there was a way to end the war without more bloodshed. The next morning, the sun rose weak and pale over the battlefield of Vera 9. Smoke still lingered in the valleys, twisting like ghosts of the machines that had fallen during decades of conflict. Captain Elias Cade and his squad crouched behind a ridge, observing the Queen's craft hovering silently above the field. Today would be the day he attempted the most daring part of his plan, direct contact with Queen Thalara. Elias' mind worked carefully, as it always did. Humans were good at fighting, yes, but humans were even better at understanding. And understanding was what would win this battle. Not guns, not armor, not explosives, understanding. "Captain," Lieutenant Myra Lynn whispered, her eyes sharp. "Are we really going to approach the Queen? This could be suicide." Elias looked at her, calm and focused. "It's not about attacking, Mara. It's about showing her the truth. If she sees the possibility of peace, her soldiers will follow. That hesitation we've been watching, that's hope waiting for direction. We give her the right words, the right gesture, and the war can end." The squad moved carefully across the ridge. Every step was measured, silent. They avoided open spaces and used rocks, debris, and the shadows of ruined buildings for cover. The Varan soldiers patrolled in small groups, but today their movements were even more hesitant than before. The humans could see it clearly now. These were disciplined warriors, yes, but they were not without conscience. Elias led the way, carrying a small device, a holographic projector designed to send a silent, clear message. He had prepared every detail. Every human gesture, every symbol of peace had been considered. They would not fight. They would not threaten. They would only show the Queen that humans were different from any enemy she had faced. As they approached the craft, Elias noticed the Queen on her observation balcony. She looked small against the golden hull, yet her presence filled the sky. Her eyes scanned the battlefield below, thoughtful and troubled. She did not glance at the humans immediately, but Elias could sense her awareness. The Queen was intelligent and humans were clever. She would notice what was different about them. The humans stopped a short distance from the craft, hidden behind a jagged rock formation. Elias activated the holographic projector. A soft light rose into the air, forming a clear human figure. It waved gently, a gesture of peace, and pointed toward the paused Varan soldiers on the battlefield. The Queen's advisor noticed first, frowning and gestured quickly. But Elias had anticipated this. The human figure mirrored her gestures, moving slowly, calmly, without aggression. The Queen leaned closer, her expression unreadable, studying the movement carefully. Elias whispered to his squad, "Watch closely. She will understand, just let her see it." Minutes passed, but for Elias it felt like hours. The Queen's eyes never left the holographic figure. She studied its movements, its gestures, its calm and deliberate display of non-aggression. Then, almost imperceptibly, her posture relaxed. Her hand moved slightly as if acknowledging the human's intent. "That's it," Elias whispered to Mara. "She sees, she understands that we're not here to fight." Mara's eyes widened. "But what now?" "Now," Elias said, "we speak." Speaking directly to the Queen was dangerous. The Varan craft was surrounded by guards who could react instantly. But Elias had a plan. Humans had a way of reaching others that didn't rely on force. It relied on courage, clarity, and trust. He had trained for this, practiced it, and believed it could work. Elias stood slowly, showing his hands clearly to indicate he carried no weapons. Then he activated a small communication device. A soft, clear voice came from it, direct, understandable, and calm. "Queen Thalara," he said, "I am Captain Elias Cade of the human contingent. We are not your enemies. We have come to show you another way, a way to protect your people without more death. Please hear me." For a moment there was silence. The queen's guards shifted uneasily, but she did not react with anger. Instead, she leaned forward, curious and cautious. Elias continued, "Your soldiers hesitate because they do not wish to fight endlessly. They are loyal to you, but even loyalty cannot erase the cost of war. We have studied your troops, and we know there is a chance to end this conflict without dishonor. You do not have to continue this path. There is a better way." The queen's eyes narrowed, thoughtful. She had heard words like this before, but never spoken with the messenger directly. Humans were known for their bravery, yes, but also for their honesty. She could feel it now, emanating from Elias, not arrogance, not fear, just truth and courage. Elias took a careful step closer, lowering his voice to a gentle whisper. "I know you are trapped by duty and expectation, but your people need you alive, and they need their soldiers to survive. Let them see your wisdom. Let them see that war is not always the answer. Please consider stopping the war before more lives are lost." The queen did not move. Her hands rested lightly on the edge of the balcony, and her eyes studied Elias. Then, almost imperceptibly, she exhaled. For the first time, Elias saw hesitation turn into possibility. She understood that humans were offering her a choice, not a challenge, but a solution. Mara whispered, "Do you think she'll?" Elias shook his head slightly. "We don't know yet, but she is listening. That is all we need for now." For a few moments there was nothing but the wind and the distant hum of the battlefield. Then the queen spoke, her voice calm but strong, audible even to the humans below. "You speak wisely, human, but do you understand what it means to stop the war? To go against tradition, against the expectations of my council?" Elias took another step forward, careful to keep his posture non-threatening. "Yes, your majesty, that is why I did not come with weapons but with understanding. Humans have faced impossible odds, and we know that courage alone can create change. You have that same courage. You can choose peace, and your people will follow you." The queen's gaze softened slightly. Elias noticed a flicker of hope, a small but bright spark that had been missing for decades. She was considering it not for herself but for her people. "You speak of hope," she said. "Hope is fragile. It can be destroyed in an instant if the wrong step is taken." Elias nodded. "That is why I am here, to guide that hope, not to demand it. Your people need a leader who sees beyond duty and fear. You are that leader. The choice is yours, but we will support it." For a long moment there was silence. Then the queen's hand moved slowly, and she gestured for her advisor to step back. The golden craft tilted slightly, lowering to show that she was ready to listen further. Elias' heart raced. This was the moment they had worked toward for months, through observation, understanding, and careful planning. Humans had survived countless battles by thinking, by understanding, and by showing courage in ways others could not. Today, that approach was working again. "Thank you, your majesty," Elias whispered. "Your people are lucky to have a leader like you." The queen's eyes met his for a long moment. There was no anger, no suspicion, only thoughtfulness, and perhaps a recognition of the truth in Elias' words. For the first time, she realized that the humans were not here to conquer, but to help. That realization alone was powerful. Elias stepped back, lowering his hands once more. "I will leave you to consider, your majesty. But remember, hope is stronger than fear, and courage is stronger than war. We are ready to help in any way we can." With that, he signaled to his squad, and they moved carefully back to cover, leaving the queen to her thoughts. The battlefield below seemed quieter somehow. The Varen soldiers still watched, still hesitant, as if they could sense a change in the air. Night fell again, but this time it felt different. The humans huddled in their temporary camp, but Elias did not rest. He stared up at the queen's craft, thinking of the whisper that had reached her. He knew this was only the beginning. The queen could still reject the idea of peace, but she had listened. She had considered it, and in the eyes of humans, that was enough to start a new path. A path that could end the war without more death, without dishonor, and with courage guiding the way. Elias closed his eyes for a moment and whispered to himself, We've made contact. Now we wait and hope that the Queen chooses wisely. Somewhere above, in the golden light of her craft, Queen Thalera sat in silence, thinking about what the human soldier had said. And somewhere in her mind, a small, fragile spark of hope began to grow. The war was far from over, but for the first time in decades, peace was possible. The next morning on Vera 9 was quiet, almost unnaturally so. The battlefield, which had been alive with the hum of machinery and the harsh fire of weapons for decades, seemed to hold its breath. Even the wind through the jagged ruins whispered differently. Captain Elias Cade crouched behind a crumbling wall with his squad, his eyes fixed on the golden craft of Queen Thalera hovering above the valley. "They're quiet," Lieutenant Mara Lynn said, her voice barely a whisper. "Too quiet, something is about to happen." Elias nodded, sensing the same tension. "Yes, the Queen is thinking, and whatever she decides today will change everything." The humans had spent the night observing carefully. The Varen soldiers, once tense and alert, were slower in their movements. Their hesitation was no longer a momentary pause. It seemed to carry expectation, as though they were waiting for a command that could alter the course of their lives. Elias realized the message he had sent yesterday had reached the Queen, and that she was acting on it. From the craft above, Queen Thalera appeared on the observation balcony, her posture calm yet commanding. She looked down at the battlefield, then slowly raised her hand. The human squad instinctively went still, every eye on the valley turned toward her. "Captain Cade," Mara whispered, "is she?" "Yes," Elias said quietly, "she is about to act." The Queen's voice rang out across the valley, clear, strong, and unwavering. "Stop the war." The words echoed over the battlefield, carried by energy amplifiers and simple sound waves alike. The soldiers below froze, weapons still raised, confused. The command was direct and absolute, yet it carried something extraordinary, the unmistakable authority of a leader acting from conviction rather than fear. For the first time in decades, the Varen soldiers looked unsure of what to do next. Some glanced at their comrades, seeking guidance. Others glanced upward at the Queen, reading the determination in her posture. Elias watched closely. He could see the change ripple through them, the hesitation giving way to cautious hope. "This is it," Elias whispered to Mara. "This is the moment humans can make history." He raised his hand slightly, signaling the squad to hold their positions. They remained silent witnesses to the unfolding change, knowing that any sudden move could be misinterpreted. Queen Thalera continued speaking, her voice firm but filled with purpose. "I am choosing peace. All forces cease attack. Hold your positions. The war ends today." The soldiers on both sides froze. Many on the coalition side, the humans included, were unsure if the order would be followed. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, the Varens lowered their weapons. One by one, soldiers hesitated, then followed the command. It was not a moment of obedience. It was a moment of recognition. The Queen had chosen a new path, and they trusted her judgment. Elias allowed himself a small, quiet smile. This was more than strategy or planning. This was trust, the very thing humans had always relied upon to survive against impossible odds. Courage alone could not have achieved this. Observation, understanding, and empathy had made the difference. From a distance, a Varen general stepped forward. Normally a figure of fear, he now looked uncertain, studying the humans carefully. He glanced at the Queen, who stood firm and resolute. Then slowly, he lowered his weapon. Others followed his example, the sound of clattering rifles and energy weapons hitting the ground echoing across the battlefield like a strange, tentative music. "Unbelievable," Mara whispered. "They're actually listening." Elias nodded. "Yes, this is proof. Humans may be few in number, but we can change minds, not just battlefields." The Queen's advisors began to murmur among themselves. Some were shocked, others skeptical, but none dared to contradict her openly. Her courage had become a rallying point, even for those bound by strict protocol. The humans observed quietly, letting the moment unfold without interference. In the valley below, the coalition forces, mostly humans, emerged from cover slowly, cautious but relieved. Soldiers began to lower their weapons entirely, moving toward their Varen counterparts with cautious curiosity. For the first time, there was no hostility. Instead, there was a fragile recognition of shared humanity and purpose. Elias felt a hand on his shoulder. He turned to see Mara smiling, eyes wide with amazement. "You did it," she said softly. All of it, the observing, the planning, the message, it worked. Elias shook his head slightly. We didn't do it alone, the Queen did this. We only showed her the possibility. From the golden craft above, Queen Thalera descended slowly toward a landing zone cleared in the center of the valley. Her movement was deliberate, confident. She stepped out, the sunlight reflecting off her armor, and the soldiers below instinctively stepped aside. Elias watched as she approached, every step measured, every gesture commanding. She walked past the human contingent first, nodding slightly in recognition. Then she paused in front of them. Her eyes met Elias's. There was no anger, no suspicion, only acknowledgement, respect, and a quiet understanding. You have done well, she said softly, her voice carrying across the silent battlefield. You have reminded me that courage is not always the loudest voice. Sometimes it is the quiet one, the one that sees and understands. Elias bowed slightly. Your Majesty, it is an honor to serve in any way that helps bring peace. The Queen looked around at her people. Today we end this war, not because of force, not because of fear, but because it is right. Every soldier here has the choice to follow my command or step back. We fight no longer, not in this war, not today. Slowly, the soldiers of both sides began to lower their weapons fully. Some hesitated, unsure if this could be true, but the Queen's presence, her voice, her authority, it was undeniable. A new atmosphere settled over the battlefield, one of cautious hope, of curiosity instead of fear. Elias watched as Varen and human soldiers began to approach one another slowly, carefully. Hands were extended. Weapons were checked and laid aside. Conversations began, halting at first but growing in confidence. The humans had never seen anything like it before. Enemies becoming allies, hesitation turning into trust, fear giving way to courage not of battle but of understanding. Mara looked at Elias. Do you realize what this means? We might actually have stopped a war today. All of it just by observing, understanding, and showing the possibility of something better. Elias nodded, eyes scanning the battlefield. Yes, and it is only the beginning. Today we have started the path to lasting peace. But tomorrow, the real work begins. The Queen's advisors approached her cautiously. Normally, this would be a moment of tension and confrontation. But today, the air was different. They could not argue openly against her decision, not with the soldiers watching, not with the humans standing as witnesses, not with the possibility of a new way of thinking in front of them. One advisor stepped forward. Your Majesty, you understand the risks. Some will not accept this, some will see this as weakness. The Queen's eyes narrowed slightly, but her voice remained calm. I understand, but true strength is not in endless fighting. True strength is in knowing when to stop, when to listen. When to protect life instead of destroying it. I choose that path, and those who wish to continue the old ways may do so elsewhere without the people I am sworn to protect. Elias felt a surge of pride, not for himself, but for humanity. Humans had a reputation for courage, yes, but more than that, they had a reputation for wisdom in impossible situations. They had survived countless worlds by understanding others, by observing, and by showing empathy. Today, that reputation had reached across galaxies and touched the heart of a monarch. The Queen stepped forward, raising her hand. Let all forces hear me. The war ends. Today we begin a new era, not of conflict, but of cooperation. Human allies, you have my gratitude. You have reminded me that hope is stronger than fear, and courage stronger than war. A cheer rose, tentative at first, then louder. Soldiers of both sides began to celebrate cautiously, some embracing, others smiling, and some wiping away tears. The sound echoed across the valley, bouncing off mountains and ruins alike, carrying a promise that had been absent for generations, the promise of peace. Elias lowered his hands, feeling the weight of what had happened. They had done something extraordinary. Not through weapons, not through strategy alone, but through understanding, courage, and the unique human ability to see beyond fear. The Queen turned to Elias once more. I will need your guidance, she said quietly. Not as a subject, not as a soldier, but as one who understands what it means to change the course of history. Elias bowed his head. It would be my honor, Your Majesty. As the sun rose higher, casting golden light over the valley, humans and Varens stood together, for the first time in decades. The war had ended. The battlefield, once a place of death and fear, became a place of possibility and new beginnings. And above it all, in her golden craft now descending toward the landing zone, Queen Thalera smiled quietly. knowing that sometimes the bravest act of all was not to fight, but to listen. The morning sun rose over Vera 9, painting the sky in shades of gold and soft gray. The battlefield, once filled with smoke, fire, and the echoes of endless war, now lay quiet. Captain Elias Cade and his human squad stood among both human and Veran soldiers, the remnants of the long conflict now turned into tentative peace. The air was filled not with fear but with cautious curiosity. Soldiers from both sides cautiously approached one another. Weapons were checked, cleaned, and placed aside, replaced with gestures of trust. Humans extended hands in greeting, and some Varans, hesitant at first, returned them. Laughter began to ripple through the ranks, fragile but real. It was a sound that had not been heard on this planet for decades. Elias walked carefully among the soldiers, observing every interaction. The Varans, though still wary, were curious. They asked questions in halting English, the common language humans had taught in previous encounters. The humans answered patiently, explaining the benefits of cooperation, the value of shared knowledge, and the strength that came from unity rather than conflict. Lieutenant Mara Lin approached Elias, her face a mixture of exhaustion and awe. "Captain, look at this. They're actually talking to each other, sharing ideas, smiling. I never thought I'd see this day on Vera 9. Elias nodded, eyes scanning the valley. "It's only the beginning, Mara. Peace is not automatic. It must be built one step at a time." But this is proof that it's possible. Above them, Queen Thalera's golden craft hovered low, now more a symbol of hope than of power. The queen had descended to the valley hours earlier to meet with both human and Veran soldiers personally. Her presence brought calm. She moved among the troops with a careful grace, speaking with them quietly, listening to their fears, and offering encouragement. Elias watched as the queen knelt to speak with a young Veran soldier who had tears in his eyes. The boy trembled as he spoke of losing friends, of years spent fighting, and of the fear that had gripped him every day. Queen Thalera listened, her expression softening, and then placed a hand gently on his shoulder. "You are brave," she said. "Not because you fought, but because you survived. You are stronger for what you have endured, and now you have the power to choose differently." The soldier looked up at her, eyes wide, and for the first time his posture straightened. Elias felt a chill of admiration. Leadership like this, quiet, firm, and compassionate, was rare. Humans had respected courage for generations, but what the queen showed today was something even humans could learn from, courage guided by empathy. Later, Elias and Mara approached the queen privately. They walked together to a small plateau overlooking the valley. The humans wanted to discuss the next steps, the delicate work of turning a fragile ceasefire into lasting peace. "Your Majesty," Elias began, "you've already done something extraordinary. You've stopped the war. But now comes the harder part, rebuilding trust not just between humans and Varans, but among your own people." The queen's eyes were thoughtful. "I know, some will resist, some will see this as weakness, but I cannot allow endless death for the sake of tradition. The humans showed me that courage is not only in battle. It is in change, in listening, in imagining something better." Mara added, "We can help. Humans are skilled at building alliances, at teaching cooperation. We can guide training, help with resources, and show your soldiers new ways to protect without destroying." Queen Thalera smiled faintly. "Then we begin together. This planet has suffered too long. We owe it to our people to make peace real, not just a command from above. And your presence, it proves that even the smallest of forces can have a large impact when guided by wisdom." Elias felt a surge of pride, not for himself, but for humanity. Humans had always survived not by being the strongest, but by being clever, adaptable, and compassionate. Today, that reputation had saved an entire world from continued destruction. Across the valley, teams of humans and Varans worked together. Engineers shared knowledge of repairing infrastructure. Medics treated wounded soldiers and civilians. Soldiers trained side by side in defensive exercises rather than attack drills. Curiosity replaced suspicion. Cooperation replaced fear. It was not instant, and there were moments of tension, but slowly, a new rhythm began to emerge, a rhythm of collaboration. As the sun rose higher, a large group of Veran civilians emerged from the ruined cities nearby. They had heard the news of the Queen's declaration and came cautiously, unsure if the humans and soldiers could truly be trusted. But as they saw Veran and human soldiers talking, laughing, and sharing food, their fear began to fade. Mothers held children close, elders nodded with tentative approval, and the air filled with quiet, hopeful conversation. Elias walked among them, offering a calm presence. He spoke softly with the people, showing them that humans had come not to dominate, but to help. Slowly, smiles appeared, hands were shaken. Barriers that had existed for decades began to crumble. By afternoon, the valley resembled something entirely new. Where there had once been only smoke, rubble, and fear, there were now signs of hope. Makeshift shelters were being repaired. Small gardens planted by humans and Varens alike began to sprout. Children played cautiously near the edges of the battlefield, laughter mingling with the hum of cautious rebuilding. Queen Thalera stood on a small platform in the center of the valley, observing the activity. She looked to Elias and their eyes met. No words were needed. The humans had done more than advise, they had inspired. They had shown her a path that no one else had dared to consider. "Captain Cade," she said softly, walking toward him, "you have reminded me why we must never underestimate others. Your people have courage, yes, but also wisdom. You have reminded me that strength is not only in arms, but in understanding. And for that, I am grateful." Elias bowed slightly. "Your Majesty, it was an honor to serve, but the honor is yours. You chose peace when it was hardest. That choice will shape generations." The Queen nodded, a quiet determination in her eyes. "And now we build. We teach our soldiers that loyalty does not demand endless war. We teach our citizens that life is more valuable than tradition alone. And we will show the galaxy that humans and Varens together can create something greater than either could alone." Mara stepped forward, glancing at the humans. "It's amazing. All this, it feels like we've made history." Elias smiled. "History is not made by one person or one species. It's made by those willing to see beyond fear and fight for what is right. Today, humans played a part, but the Queen and her people made the choice. That's the real victory." The day continued with work and cooperation. Engineers repaired broken structures, soldiers trained together in non-combative drills, and medics taught emergency care. Humans shared knowledge of agriculture, technology, and diplomacy, while Varens contributed their own skills in energy management, construction, and strategic thinking. Every interaction built trust, every shared task built connection. Elias watched as two young soldiers, one human, one Varen, worked together to repair a communication device. At first, they argued over methods, but soon they laughed, discovering that each could learn from the other. It was a small thing, but Elias knew that such small things were the foundation of lasting peace. By evening, the valley was quiet again, but now it was a peaceful quiet. Fires burned in small communal areas, not as weapons, but as warmth. Conversations were soft but filled with hope. And above all, the golden craft of Queen Thalera rested low in the valley, no longer a symbol of fear, but of leadership, courage, and new beginnings. Elias stood beside Mara, looking out at the scene. "It's incredible," Mara said. "We've seen war and now this. Do you think it will last?" Elias shrugged, but his expression was calm. "It will if people continue to choose hope over fear, understanding over anger. Humans have survived because we do this. And now, so will they. It's up to all of them now to build what we've started." The Queen approached again, quiet and thoughtful. "Captain Cade, humans have shown us that courage is more than fighting. It is seeing possibilities, taking risks for what is right, and acting with wisdom. I hope that other worlds will learn from this, that your example will travel far." Elias bowed again. "It will, Your Majesty, and I hope that Vera 9 becomes a symbol of what can happen when courage and wisdom are combined. Not just for humans, but for every being who dreams of peace." The Queen looked across the valley, at humans and Varens working side by side, at children playing where soldiers had once fallen, at communities beginning to rebuild. For the first time in decades, she smiled fully, a smile of hope and pride. "Then let us begin," she said. "Let us build a future that is worthy of all who live here. Let this world be proof that even the smallest spark of courage can light the way to something greater." Elias watched, heart swelling with quiet pride. Humans had survived countless worlds by adapting, by understanding, by acting with courage and wisdom. Today, they had done the same on Vera 9, not by weapons, but by the very qualities that made humanity unique. And as the sun set, casting a golden glow over the valley, humans and Varens alike worked together to build that future. For the first time in generations, peace was more than a dream, it was real. And somewhere in that valley, a human soldier smiled quietly. knowing that humanity had once again proven its worth to the galaxy.